For more than 1,000 years, one city sat like a lock on the throat of the world's most important crossroads, Europe on one side, Asia on the other, where the Black Sea pours into the Mediterranean, where merchants, armies, and empires all had to pass if they wanted access to the richest routes on Earth, all within sight of those legendary walls. Its name was Constantinople. And for centuries, Constantinople did something almost no city in human history has ever done. It said no to everyone: Persians, Arabs, Rus raiders, steppe armies, crusaders. Wave after wave came for it, because whoever held this city could control trade, project power, and claim legitimacy. But they all ran into the same problem: the walls. These weren't ordinary walls. They were the kind of fortifications that made a city feel less like a place and more like a machine built to resist history itself. Yet in 1453, that machine broke. A 21-year-old ruler arrived with an idea that would change siege warfare forever. And when the city finally fell, it didn't just end an empire. It tilted the balance of power across continents. So the question isn't only, how did Constantinople fall? The question is, why did its fall change the world? This is Empire of Time, where we trace the moments that shifted history. And today, we begin with the city that changed the world. To understand that, you don't need to start with the Ottomans. You start with geography. Constantinople wasn't the biggest city in the world by 1453. It wasn't the wealthiest. By then, it had shrunk, wounded by centuries of wars, plagues, and political decline. But it still had something more valuable than population or gold: position. Look at a map, and you'll see it instantly. The Bosporus Strait, a narrow ribbon of water that controls access between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. If you hold Constantinople, you can tax trade, you can choke rivals, you can decide who gets through and who doesn't. It's the kind of location that creates a gravitational pull in history. Empires don't just want it, they need it. And for 1,000 years, the Eastern Roman Empire, what we call the Byzantine Empire, held that gateway. They called themselves Romans. They saw their city as the continuation of Rome's authority, Rome's faith, and Rome's memory. Constantinople was not just a capital, it was an idea, a final claim that the Roman world still lived. And then there were the defenses. The Theodosian Walls, 3 layers deep in places, formed a land barrier so intimidating that attackers often decided, after one look, to try something else. A moat, an outer wall, an inner wall, towers at regular intervals, and behind them, defenders who had centuries of experience surviving sieges. Even if an army reached the city, it still had to keep itself alive long enough to take it. Sieges are not just about weapons. They are about time, food, disease, morale. Most armies break before the walls do. And Constantinople had one more advantage: the Golden Horn. This natural harbor was the city's shield on the north side, and it was protected by a chain, an iron barrier stretched across the mouth of the harbor. If enemy ships tried to enter, the chain stopped them. So if you wanted to take Constantinople, you had to beat the walls on land, while the city stayed supplied by sea. For centuries, that equation favored the defenders, which is why the city survived. Now, enter a young ruler with an old obsession. His name was Mehmed II. In 1453, he was only 21. But he had one goal that dominated his imagination: Constantinople. not just as a conquest, as a statement. Because if you take the city no one can take, you become undeniable. You are no longer a regional power. You are the power. And Mehmed understood something that earlier attackers didn't. If you fight Constantinople the old way, you lose. So he prepared to fight it in a new way. First, he tightened the noose. He built and strengthened fortifications along the Bosporus to control traffic and isolate the city. He gathered troops and supplies. And he did something that signaled a new era of warfare. He brought artillery, big artillery, the kind of guns that weren't just weapons. They were engineering projects. Some accounts describe massive bombards, cannons so large they had to be hauled by teams of oxen and men, moving slowly like a siege tower made of metal. Casting and transporting these guns required planning, money, and logistics. And this is where the story stops being medieval and starts feeling modern. Because the fall of Constantinople wasn't simply a brave army overwhelms a weakened city. It was a systems victory, a logistics victory, a technology and organization victory. Casting and transporting these guns required planning, money, and logistics. And this is where the story stops being medieval and starts feeling modern. Because the fall of Constantinople wasn't simply a brave army overwhelms a weakened city, it was a systems victory, a logistics victory, a technology and organization victory. Mehmed was building an answer to the walls, not a ladder, not a ram, a new kind of force. Inside the city, the defenders had their own leader, Emperor Constantine XI. He didn't have the manpower of past centuries. He didn't have the resources to rebuild the empire's strength, but he had the walls. He had the city's legacy. And he had people who knew that if Constantinople fell, their world would end. So they repaired what they could, prepared what they had, and waited. And then the siege began. In the spring of 1453, Ottoman forces surrounded the city. From the outside, it may have looked like every other siege in history. But the sound was different. Because now, the walls were being hit by cannon fire, again, and again, and again. Stone that had resisted armies was now being tested by physics. And every day the guns spoke, they carried a message. This is not the old world. But artillery alone wasn't enough. Cannons of this era were powerful, but slow, inaccurate, and difficult to maintain. They overheated, they cracked. They required constant effort to reload, and the defenders adapted. They repaired breaches at night. They filled gaps with earth and rubble. They used smaller cannon and archers to punish any attempt to rush the walls. So the siege turned into a contest of endurance. Mehmed was trying to create a break in the city's armor faster than the defenders could patch it. And then he looked at the Golden Horn, the harbor protected by the chain. As long as the defenders controlled that harbor, the city could breathe. So Mehmed needed a way to get ships behind the chain. And this is where one of the most famous moves of the siege takes place. The move that feels like a legend, until you realize it was logistics. If you can't go through the chain, go around it. Mehmed's forces prepared an overland route, using logs, greased timbers, and manpower to move ships across the hills from the Bosporus into the Golden Horn. Ships on land. Imagine the scene. Night, torches, wood creaking under weight, ropes tightening, men shouting in rhythm. And then, slowly, the impossible happens. Ottoman ships slide over the ground like shadows and enter the harbor from behind. When dawn breaks, the defenders look out and see enemy sails where the chain was supposed to make that impossible. It is a psychological shock, because it doesn't just threaten a flank. It tells the defenders something far worse. Their assumptions no longer protect them. Now the city is pressured from multiple directions. The walls are being hammered. The harbor is compromised. Supplies and reinforcements become harder. Every day costs more. And the defenders are exhausted. They are not just fighting an army. They are fighting time. At the heart of the defense were experienced soldiers and allies, including fighters from Italian city-states who understood siege warfare. The defense became a desperate, disciplined effort to keep the walls intact, to keep morale from collapsing, to survive one more day. But Mehmed also understood another truth of sieges. Eventually, cracks become patterns. A weak spot becomes a target. Repeated damage becomes inevitable.
Or is it?
As the siege dragged on, the Ottomans intensified their assaults. They attacked breaches. They probed for failure points. They tried to exploit exhaustion. And inside the city, Constantine XI faced a brutal reality. There was no Second Empire waiting to rescue him. There were no endless reserves. There was only the city, the walls, and the people holding them. The defenders fought with a kind of intensity that comes from knowing the stakes are absolute. Because if Constantinople falls, it doesn't just mean defeat. It means a new world. And then comes the final day. May 29th, 1453. The Ottomans launch a major assault. Wave after wave presses forward. The defenders fight in tight spaces, under smoke, noise, and confusion. The walls, damaged, repaired, damaged again, are pushed toward their limit. There are moments in sieges when the outcome changes not because one side suddenly becomes stronger, but because the other side finally becomes too tired to remain perfect. Defense requires perfection. Attack requires only one opening. And that day, an opening comes. The exact details are debated in the chaos of history, but the result is clear. Ottoman forces break through. The defense collapses into street fighting. And the city, after 1,000 years of survival, falls. Emperor Constantine XI dies in the fighting, refusing to abandon the city. In that moment, an empire that called itself Roman ends. Not with a treaty, not with a slow fade, but with the sound of walls breaking and a capital changing hands. So why does this matter beyond one city? Because Constantinople wasn't just conquered, it was transformed into a new center of power. Mehmed didn't treat it like a prize to loot and abandon. He treated it like a capital. He understood that taking the city was only the beginning. Because once you hold Constantinople, you can shape the flow of trade. You can move armies with greater reach. You can command routes between seas. And you can claim something priceless: legitimacy. Mehmed began presenting himself not merely as a conqueror, but as a ruler of an imperial tradition. The city, over time, became Istanbul, the beating heart of a rising empire. And that empire would soon project power across the Balkans, the Eastern Mediterranean, the Middle East, and North Africa. But the fall of Constantinople also sent shockwaves far beyond the Ottoman world. In Europe, it wasn't only a strategic loss, it was symbolic. To many, it felt like the last great gate of the old Christian Roman world had fallen. It changed political calculations. It changed military priorities. It changed the psychological landscape. And economically, it contributed to a growing European urgency to find new routes to Asia, routes that did not depend on contested choke points. This isn't a single-cause story. History rarely is. But the fall of Constantinople became one of the accelerants in a larger shift, a push toward maritime exploration, new trade strategies, and a world that was about to connect in ways no medieval ruler could have imagined. There's also a deeper reason this moment matters. Constantinople's fall marks a turning point in warfare itself. The Theodosian Walls were a masterpiece of the older world, a world where stone defenses could outlast most armies. But artillery changed the equation. Not overnight, not everywhere, but definitively. If enough metal and organization can break the best walls on Earth, then no fortress is invincible. Power begins shifting toward states that can build systems, boundaries, logistics, supply chains, disciplined armies, and centralized authority. In other words, the future belongs to those who can organize, and the Ottomans, in 1453, proved they could. So when we call Constantinople the city that changed the world, we mean this. Its position made it a key to continents. Its walls represented the old rules of defense. Its fall proved those rules were changing, and its transformation into an Ottoman capital helped create a new superpower, one that would dominate its region for centuries. This is not just the end of Byzantium, it is the opening chapter of a different era. In the next episode, we step backward, because the real question is not only how Constantinople fell, but how the Ottomans became capable of taking it. How does a frontier state rise into an empire powerful enough to break the greatest city on Earth? That story begins long before 1453. It begins on the edge of worlds, where borders were unstable, loyalties were negotiable, and opportunity was everywhere for those ruthless enough to seize it. If you want to understand the Ottoman Empire, you start here, at the city that changed the world, and the moment time shifted. This is Empire of Time. Join us next time as we rewind the clock and trace the Ottoman rise from frontier tribe to world empire.